Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. He just wanted peace, a quiet lake, a forgotten house, a place to heal. What he got was war. When a ruthless HOA queen and her entitled son tried to steal his home with lies, forged deeds, and intimidation, they had no idea who they were messing with. Welcome to the Battle of Clear Pine. When I first laid eyes on the old lake house, I wasn't thinking about property lines or HOAs or anyone's spoiled kid. I was thinking about peace, about the kind of silence that hums in your bones after years of noise. The house stood on the far edge of a forgotten road in the Carolina mountains, framed by tall pines and a sapphire stretch of water that looked like it had never seen a motorboat. The place had been empty for nearly a decade, half choked in moss and memory. Perfect. I needed a place that didn't ask questions or offer pity. After losing Hannah, my wife of 16 years, I didn't want condolences or casseroles. I wanted to build something, fix something. So I bought the house. Cash deal, no mortgage. Private sale from an elderly man whose family hadn't visited in years. Everything about the transaction was clean. I had title insurance, recorded deeds, a verified plat map, a topographical survey, and a clean slate with the county. The kicker, it sat completely outside any HOA jurisdiction. The nearest community development, Clear Pine Retreat, was nearly half a mile down into the valley, and I intended to keep it that way. Restoring the house was the kind of therapy I understood. I rebuilt the deck, pressure washed decades of grime from the siding, and refinished the pine floors until they shone like amber. I hired local crews for structural work, got all my permits filed and stamped at the county office, and installed a modest floating dock and a boat lift, all up to code. Nothing flashy, just functional, clean, and mine. The guest pavilion out back started as a storage shed, but I converted it into a small cabin for visitors, something my late wife had always dreamed of having. I even built a stone fire ring with my own hands, laying each rock like a little prayer. Most days, I worked until dusk, then sat on the dock with a cold beer, listening to the frogs and watching the stars wink awake. No neighbors, no lawn committees, no rules printed in Comic Sans on a laminated HOA bulletin. Just water, woods, and quiet. That was the whole damn point. Occasionally, I'd see folks from down in the valley, joggers in boutique activewear, families with drones buzzing like angry wasps overhead, a few teens in lifted golf carts. They mostly kept to themselves, and I was fine with that. The only time I made real contact was with a UPS driver who got lost trying to find Lot 41 in the Clear Pine development and ended up on my gravel drive. He looked surprised I even lived here. Most people say this house is cursed or condemned, he laughed. I told him it was just underappreciated. One Friday evening, I noticed music echoing across the water. Not a little Bluetooth speaker, full-on bass lines and hoots, and the unmistakable sound of someone trying to play Wonderwall on an acoustic guitar with two broken strings. I hiked along the southern side of the lake and found a group of maybe a dozen teenagers drinking, tossing garbage into the fire pit I built, and using my dock like it was a trampoline. One of them was a kid in designer swim trunks, vaping like he was getting paid by the puff and barking orders like a drunk frat president. When I asked them to leave, he raised his eyebrows like I was the intruder. "Relax, man," he slurred. "This place is basically public. My mom said we can hang here whenever." That set off every internal alarm I had. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just called the sheriff. By the time the deputies arrived, the kids had scattered like raccoons. No charges, but they took down the name of the one who'd stayed behind long enough to argue, Randall Stone. The next morning, I asked around at the local bait shop, and the name got a few knowing looks. "Karen Stone's boy," one guy said, shaking his head. "HOA queen down in Clear Pine. Thinks she owns the whole mountain." I laughed, not nervously, more the kind of laugh you give when someone tells you Sasquatch pays taxes. I had documents in a fireproof safe and a deed notarized 6 ways from Sunday. I wasn't in any HOA, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let some bored rich kid turn my dock into his beer pong arena. That night, I installed motion-activated trail cameras around the property and set up a logging gate I could lock from the inside. I didn't think I'd need it. Not really. But something about that kid's face, entitled Smug, Convinced, made the back of my neck itch. And still, I thought that would be the end of it. Just a brat with too much free time, and a mom who probably sent angry emails when Starbucks got his name wrong. I didn't realize I'd just stepped into a quiet war. She didn't knock. Just stood there one morning like she'd been conjured up from the smell of burnt perfume and courtroom drama, blazer pressed, heels sharp enough to puncture tires, and a red leather folder tucked under one arm like it contained the 10 Commandments. And 3 cease and desists. Karen Melissa Stone. The name had preceded her like a warning siren, but seeing her in person, that was something else entirely. "Mr. Beckett," she said, more as a formality than a question. I nodded, wiping varnish off my hands with an old t-shirt. I'd been oiling the porch rail. She didn't even glance at the house. "I'm here regarding the property you're currently occupying." That phrasing made me blink. I didn't live in a damn tent. "Occupying," I repeated. She smiled in that patronizing way lawyers do when they think they're about to say something that will ruin your month. This residence was formerly associated with our community through historical covenant relationships. While it may have been sold improperly, it was intended for transfer to my son, Randall Stone. I just stared at her. She wasn't joking. "It was verbally promised," she continued, "years ago by one of our original board members. A gentleman's agreement, if you will. I'm afraid this property was never meant to be sold to a third party." She spoke like I was an accidental squatter, and her family's heirloom dresser had somehow walked off and bought itself a mortgage. "I'm not part of your HOA," I said flatly. "This property is outside the boundaries." It was privately owned. I purchased it legally. She gave a little breath through her nose. Contempt, not surprise. "That may be true from a strictly technical standpoint," she said, flicking open her folder. "But morally, the community has long considered this property part of its extended stewardship. My son has grown up knowing this would be his one day. I'm offering you 30 days to vacate. After that, we will pursue legal action for adverse possession and misappropriation of community infrastructure, adverse possession." Jesus. I'd heard of HOAs trying to police fence paint, but this woman wanted to claim my house like it was the Louisiana Purchase. I didn't invite her in. Instead, I went inside and returned with a full binder of documents, recorded deed, title insurance, parcel number, certified property maps from the county, and confirmation that the land had never once in its entire history been part of any HOA. "Feel free to file whatever you'd like," I said, flipping through the pages. "But if your son wants a lake house, I suggest Zillow." Karen didn't take the binder. She just gave me a long, silent look, like she was measuring me. Not to understand me, but to figure out what kind of leverage she'd need to pry me loose. She turned without another word and walked off the porch. Her SUV was parked halfway across my gravel driveway, like she was marking territory. Before she left, she pulled a wooden stake from her trunk and jammed it into the dirt by my gate. Taped to it was a laminated sign that read, in bold black type, "Subject to HOA Community Review, Clear Pine Retreat. No letterhead, no county seal, just the nerve." The next morning, I got mail. Not in the mailbox, of course. It had been placed under a decorative rock on the porch, like a ransom note from an overconfident paperboy. It was a formal-looking envelope, complete with a fake HOA watermark and printed in Times New Roman for that added touch of unearned authority. Inside was a bill, $900, due monthly, for ongoing community infrastructure services. The infrastructure in question, I assumed, was the pothole-ridden road I maintained myself, the drainage culvert I cleaned by hand every spring, and the dock I rebuilt using my own damn lumber. I drove straight to the county land records office. The clerk there, Nancy, was a 70-year-old eagle with bifocals, and she remembered me from when I filed the title transfer. "Clear Pine," she said, squinting at the envelope. "That HOA has tried to expand 3 times, got shut down each time. Your parcel's exempt. Says it right here on the overlay map." She pulled out the plate. Sure enough, my land was a lone gray rectangle floating serenely outside the pastel blue of the Clear Pine boundary lines. I made half a dozen certified copies of everything, laminated them, and filed digital versions with my attorney. I also took Nancy out for coffee and made damn sure she'd testify in court if needed. She agreed, smiling like she'd just found an old revolver in a box labeled just in case. That evening, I installed a second trail cam. Higher up, wider field of view. If Karen wanted to play games, I was more than happy to document every move. Let her bury herself one smug sign at a time. The hum of engines woke me before sunrise. Not the usual rusted-out truck from the fishing cabin down the hill. These were heavy, mechanical, purposeful. I pulled on jeans, grabbed my boots, and stepped out to the sound of tires chewing gravel. 2 moving trucks were idling on my driveway. The first driver, a guy in a gray t-shirt with a clipboard and zero shame, stepped out and looked me dead in the eyes like I was the one parked on his property. "Morning," he said. "Got a delivery for this address. Says here it's a full unload. Bedroom sets, gym equipment, some large screen TVs. 3-bedroom setup." He waved the clipboard, which had my address printed right on it in bold letters. And then, like a magician popping out of a trash can, Randall Stone himself emerged from the passenger seat of a black Escalade parked behind them. Baseball cap, mirrored sunglasses, holding a breakfast burrito in one hand and a can of Monster in the other. "Yo," he said, mouth full. "Told you I was moving in." "Told her too." "Guess that means you gotta go, bro. I didn't respond right away." My brain was processing the sheer level of arrogance. It was like watching a possum walk into a bear's den and declare it his treehouse. "Turn those trucks around," I said, calm as I could manage. "This is private property." "You're trespassing." One of the drivers glanced at Randall. Randall shrugged. "Pretty sure this is a family home," he said. "Promised years ago. You're just some old dude squatting." "Old dude? I'm 42. I've had protein bars in my glove box older than this kid's frontal lobe." I didn't argue. I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's office. I'd already dealt with these fools once. I wasn't about to get dragged into a screaming match with a hungover man-child who probably thought property law was a band name. The dispatcher took my report seriously. Apparently, this wasn't the first time HOA nonsense had spilled over into the sheriff's hands. 30 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. Deputy Wilkes stepped out, looked at the trucks, at Randall, then at me. He was maybe 30, buzz cut, no-nonsense type. I handed him the packet with my deed, parcel number, property lines, and video stills from the last trespass. He took one look and whistled. "Yeah, you're solid," he said. Then he turned to Randall. "Sir, you've been told to stay off this property." "This is criminal trespass," Randall laughed. "My mom says—" Wilkes didn't let him finish. Within 5 minutes, Randall was in the back seat of the cruiser, swearing, sweating, still clutching his goddamn breakfast burrito like it was Exhibit A. The drivers backed out slowly. One of them apologized. "We don't get paid enough for this crap," he muttered. I watched them disappear down the road. For a moment, I thought maybe that would be it. Maybe Karen would finally get the message. Her little prince wasn't welcome, and the law was on my side. I was wrong. That evening, I checked my email and found a flood of messages. Apparently, someone had posted a video, grainy footage of me physically threatening a young man on his family's property. The caption, "Clear Pine Community Stands Against Violence." The comments were worse. "This squatter's going to get someone hurt. He's armed and unstable. Probably stole the deed. Why won't the county do something?" Karen, of course, hadn't posted it under her own name. It came from a freshly minted Facebook account named Lake Justice NC, but her writing style was as subtle as a tire iron to the kneecap. Then came the notes, slipped under my windshield, left in my mailbox, taped to my gate. "The community sees you. Enjoy your last month." Squatting isn't ownership. That night, I saw a figure near the tree line with a flashlight. When I stepped outside, they vanished. The next morning, one of my trail cams was gone. Just a cracked plastic housing left behind. I filed a second police report. This time, I added a complaint about online harassment, impersonation, and vandalism. And because I was done playing defense, I installed 2 more cameras, wired, camouflaged, high-res with infrared. Then I bought a fresh legal warning sign and mounted it right next to hers. "Private property not subject to HO," and underneath, in smaller letters, "Trespassers will be documented, prosecuted, and publicly humiliated." I figured if Karen wanted a war, she could have one, with paperwork, not pitchforks. I knew they'd be back. People like Karen don't take no as an answer, they take it as a delay. And sure enough, within the week, the escalation turned from digital lies to physical sabotage. It started with the mailbox. Or rather, the space where the mailbox had been. I walked down my gravel path to find the post uprooted and dumped into the creek. The box itself had been pried open, mangled, and left in the brush like a warning. Inside was a laminated flyer folded into the shape of a snake. On it, "Clear Pine HOA. Violators will be addressed." Addressed. Not reported, not fined. Addressed. The same morning, I found fishing lines strung across the narrow trail to the dock. Ankle height. I nearly broke my neck. Someone had tied it between two trees and left broken glass beneath the path like some kind of sadistic tripwire trap. My boat's mooring rope had been cut, and it had drifted halfway into the reeds before I managed to wade out and retrieve it. The knot wasn't frayed. It was sliced, clean, razor blade work. And then there was the camera. The one I had mounted discreetly on the eave of the guest pavilion, angled toward the driveway. When I checked the feed that night, the last thing it captured was the reflection of another lens. Someone had installed a camera of their own, high up in the tree line, angled toward the second-story bedroom window. My bedroom. That was it. I stopped being patient. The next morning, I walked into the sheriff's office with a jump drive, a folder of stills, and a statement thicker than a phone book. Deputy Wilkes wasn't in, but I met with Sergeant Ellison, a woman who clearly didn't have time for HOA melodrama, but raised both eyebrows when I showed her the footage. "You've got a real problem on your hands," she said, flipping through the printouts. "That camera's illegal surveillance. If it's tied back to anyone, that's a felony." She sent a deputy out to retrieve it. They bagged it as evidence and started a case file under harassment and trespassing. I added in the booby trap on the trail and the missing mailbox. Meanwhile, I made 3 copies of everything and sent them to my lawyer, Hank Walden, a barrel-chested ex-prosecutor who'd left the DA's office to open a boutique firm dealing with property rights and real estate fraud. I'd retained him after the stunt with the moving trucks. This new batch of sabotage made his eyes narrow. "Good," he said. "They're overplaying. Let them. Every move they make gives us ammunition. We just need the right moment to fire it." Karen, meanwhile, decided to go public. She called an emergency HOA meeting in the Clear Pine Clubhouse. I wasn't invited, of course, but one of the newer residents, Adam Forsyth, mid-30s, software guy with a conscience, had reached out to me via email after reading the HOA's newsletter and finding it suspicious. He offered to record the meeting for me. The video was a masterclass in smug delusion. Karen stood at the head of the conference table like a CEO addressing a particularly dim boardroom. She held up a sheet of paper and declared, in her lawyer voice, that she had evidence the house had been promised. Yes, promised to her family. The sheet was a letter, supposedly from the former owner. No envelope, no notary, no date, beyond a scribbled year in the top corner. "I, Wallace J. Haskins, do hereby express my wish that this lake property be transitioned into the care of the Stone family as a gesture of gratitude and community continuity." That was it. One sentence. In Comic Sans. Some HOA members clapped. Others looked vaguely embarrassed. Adam's footage zoomed in on the signature. Shaky. Smudged. Almost like someone had tried to trace it with their non-dominant hand. Karen passed it around like gospel. She then declared that transition of authority would begin within the month and that the community should prepare for the harmonization of the lakefront. I didn't know whether to laugh or build a moat. Back at my property, the intimidation didn't stop. I caught 2 teenagers from the HOA community, Randall's buddies, spray painting the side of my guest house. I snapped their pictures and called it in. No arrests, but the incident went on record. I also found another envelope taped to my front door. Inside, a printed invoice demanding back payments totaling $2,700 for HOA infrastructure usage. Due immediately. I stuck it in my wood stove and watched it burn. By now, every inch of my property was under 24/7 surveillance. I upgraded to motion-detecting floodlights, wireless perimeter alarms, and cloud backups. I installed trail spikes in the hidden access paths. And I slept with a tire iron next to the bed, not because I expected a home invasion, but because it made me feel better than a baseball bat. Every move they made, every note they left, every smug power play, they were building my case for me. Karen thought she was pushing me out. What she didn't realize was that she was giving me everything I needed to bury her. I should have known Karen wouldn't stop with just flyers and fake invoices. She was a lawyer by training, which meant she didn't believe in facts, only in documents that looked like facts, and what she brought next was a masterpiece of manipulation. It started innocently enough. Adam, my HOA mole, forwarded me a notice of the next Clear Pine Retreat board meeting. In bold at the top, Special Community Session Legacy Property Transition Ceremony. Like they were baptizing the house. Then came the press. A glowing article appeared on a small local real estate blog, featuring a picture of Randall, shirt pressed, hair styled, standing in front of my house, arms crossed like he'd just closed escrow. The article described the home as a multi-generational asset tied to the Stone family's vision for Clear Pine's future. They even quoted recently uncovered historical documents confirming the intention of land transfer. I called the blog's editor and threatened a defamation suit so fast they pulled the article within 2 hours. But the screenshots had already spread. Karen wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to flood the narrative until the truth drowned under paperwork and hashtags. 3 days later, I got a certified envelope delivered by a man who looked like he regretted being involved. Inside, a letter typed in thick serif font on faux parchment paper. To whom it may concern, I, Wallace J. Haskins, being of sound mind and reflective intent, do hereby declare that the lakefront property located at Parcel 17 B-09-1198 shall upon my passing or inability to inhabit be entrusted to the care and benefit of the Stone family, residents of Clear Pine Retreat, in perpetuity and with gratitude. Sincerely, W.J. Haskins. It was signed in smudged black ink. No notary stamp, no witness line, and the kicker, Wallace Haskins, the supposed author, was still alive. I knew where to find him. I'd met him once when buying the house, a withered man in his 80s with a dry sense of humor and a fondness for butterscotch. He now lived in a hospice facility 30 miles east, and I had no intention of letting Karen use his name like a sledgehammer. When I walked into the common room of the facility, he recognized me right away, even cracked a smile. "Well, if it isn't the man who finally fixed that rotting deck," he croaked. I told him about the letter. His eyes narrowed and his hand tightened around the armrest of his chair. "I didn't write that," he said flatly. "Karen came by a year ago, offered me 15 grand to say I intended to donate the land. I told her she could shove her offer into the lake. I pulled out my phone and asked if he'd mind saying that on camera. He laughed and adjusted his collar like I'd just offered him a martini. He gave me a full statement, recorded and dated. Then he signed an affidavit prepared by my lawyer the next day, notarized by a mobile notary we brought in just to make it airtight. Back home, I shared the footage with Adam, who nearly fell out of his chair laughing. Karen had paraded that forged letter around the HOA like a golden ticket, and now I had the man himself calling it horse crap in a fancy envelope, but the HOA wasn't done. That same evening, a man in a reflective vest and hard hat came onto my property holding a clipboard. He claimed to be from the Community Utilities Oversight Committee and said he was here to assess drainage impact compliance, which would have been adorable if not for the fact that the real county doesn't have a department called that. He tried to take pictures around the dock. I asked for ID. He handed me a laminated badge with the Clear Pine logo on it and the name G. Winters. I took a photo of it and told him to leave. When he hesitated, I pulled my phone, dialed the sheriff's non-emergency line, and started narrating his appearance out loud. He left before I finished the sentence. Later, my cameras caught him returning after dark, this time without a vest, snapping photos from the edge of the tree line. He vanished before I could confront him, but the footage was clear enough to identify him. My lawyer filed an injunction request the next morning. Hank's exact words were, "This isn't civil harassment anymore. This is organized attempted fraud." He began preparing a full case: forgery, harassment, defamation, illegal surveillance, attempted property seizure, and tortious interference. I supplied every document, photo, video, and timestamp. But then, by pure accident, we found the real smoking gun. Randall got himself arrested again, this time for a DUI 2 counties over, and because the arresting department impounded his car, they seized his laptop bag as well. Within 72 hours, the district attorney contacted Hank. On Randall's laptop was a series of Word files, all stored in the cloud, auto-synced to his iCloud account. One of them was titled W. Haskins Legacy Letter Final.docx. The author metadata, created by melissa.stone at clearpineboard.org. The document history showed every revision, from Karen's rough drafts to the final print-ready version. It even included a note: "Remember to print on aged paper." They'd forged the entire thing on her son's laptop, and he, the brilliant heir to the HOA throne, had kept it synced to the cloud. Game over. There's something deeply satisfying about watching a lie unravel from the inside out. Karen had spent weeks posturing like a queen with a divine claim to the lake, but now her crown was digital, stored in the autosave history of her idiot son's cloud account. The day after we got the confirmation from the DA's office, Hank called me with a voice like he'd just bitten into a juicy steak. "Tom," he said, "we're done gathering. It's time to go to war. We filed a formal complaint in district court. Intentional fraud, property harassment, conspiracy to interfere with title, and stalking. But Hank didn't stop there. He filed a temporary restraining order against Karen and Randall, citing trespassing, surveillance, and attempts to interfere with quiet enjoyment of property. We attached everything: the fake letter metadata, the video of Wallace Haskins refuting the gift, the spray painting teens, the HOA meeting recordings, the cut mooring lines, the planted camera pointed at my bedroom. The judge signed the TRO in under 2 hours. I laminated it and nailed a copy to my front gate, right under Karen's rotting subject to HOA review sign. That same evening, Deputy Wilkes came by personally to serve Randall at his mother's home. According to Adam, who'd been watching from his front porch, Karen tried to block the door and told the deputy, "You don't understand the kind of mistake you're making," to which Wilkes reportedly replied, "Ma'am, the only mistake here is thinking. You're above the law. I like that man more every day." Meanwhile, Hank prepared our case for a full-blown lawsuit. The plan was to sue not only Karen and Randall, but also the Clear Pine Retreat HOA as an entity. Why? Because they had actively circulated false documents, sanctioned illegal surveillance, and attempted to seize a non-member's private property. Adam's inside recordings would be key. He had footage of Karen showing the fake letter to the board and saying, "We just need this to look official for the optics." Optics, my ass. While the legal wheels turned, Karen decided to go scorched earth. She knew we had her dead to rights, so she pulled her last card: disinformation at scale. I woke up to find hundreds of flyers stuffed into my fence, my truck windshield, even taped to the underside of my dock. They were printed on cheap neon paper with screaming headlines like HOAHEROINEFACESSMEARCAMPAIGNBYILLEGALOCCUPANT. Clear Pine fights for historic preservation against fraudster. Do you know who lives on your lakefront? Should you? Each included an out-of-context photo of me holding a hammer or wearing sunglasses and looking vaguely threatening. One had been clearly edited to darken my skin tone and shadow my eyes. Karen had gone full propaganda minister. I kept a few for evidence and burned the rest in a metal trash barrel like I was erasing the last traces of a failed revolution, but that wasn't the worst of it. 2 nights later, I heard an engine. Not the soft roll of a passing car, a roar tearing up the gravel. By the time I reached the window, a truck had already spun a donut on my lawn and was speeding off, spraying dirt and broken stakes in its wake. The next morning, I found another message, painted across my retaining wall in red, HOAORWAR. At this point, it wasn't just legal anymore. It was personal, violent, deranged. Sergeant Ellison came out with 2 deputies to inspect the vandalism. She took one look at the message and said, "This is the last line. If they cross it again, we press criminal charges." We filed a report, added it to the case, and Hank immediately added criminal harassment to the suit. I upgraded my security again. Floodlights with smart tracking, new cameras synced directly to an off-site server, a remote satellite backup just in case they tried to kill the power. I even bought a motion sensor that tripped a very loud recorded voice anytime someone stepped past the tree line. Warning, you are on private property. This area is under video and audio surveillance. Law enforcement has been notified. It scared the hell out of 2 deer the first night. I considered that a bonus. Then came the last desperate move. Karen, clearly rattled, tried to backpedal. She sent me an email through her lawyer, an oily man named Brent Carr, offering to settle amicably, asking that I sign a non-aggression memorandum acknowledging the HOA's concerns about the historic stewardship of the lake region. I forwarded it to Hank with one sentence: "Can I sue them again just for this?" He replied with, "Not legally, but we can frame it as implicit admission of wrongdoing. I'll make it sing, the real showdown was coming. Depositions were scheduled, evidence was logged, witnesses lined up, including Wallace Haskins, the hospice nurses, Adam, Deputy Wilkes, and even the original surveyor who filed the property map decades ago. Karen thought she was fighting a squatter. What she didn't know was that she'd declared war on someone who built dams for a living. Court day, the kind of morning where the air feels heavy even before the sun's fully up. I wore a charcoal gray suit, same one I'd used when I spoke at Hannah's funeral. Simple, quiet, serious. I wasn't dressing to impress. I was dressing to bury. The courthouse sat like a bunker in the center of the county seat, white columns and American flags snapping in the breeze, and an interior that still smelled like lemon floor wax and cheap coffee. I arrived an hour early with Hank and met our team in the hallway outside courtroom C. Hank had printed, bound, and color-coded 400 pages of evidence, including the notarized deed and property surveys, a sworn affidavit and video testimony from Wallace Haskins, metadata from Randall's laptop showing authorship of the forged letter, the falsified HOA invoices and signs, videos of trespassing, harassment, surveillance, and property damage, police reports, emails, social media posts, and flyers, the fake Community Utilities Oversight Badge, Adam's full video of the HOA meeting, and then there were the witnesses, Sergeant Ellison, Deputy Wilkes, Nancy from the Land Records Office, the hospice nurse, Adam Forsyth, even the UPS driver who'd first told me Karen thought she owned the mountain. On the other side sat Karen, regal and rigid in a navy blue skirt suit, flanked by Randall, who looked like he'd aged 5 years and 2 months, and a visibly uncomfortable man in a crumpled beige blazer, Brent Carr, her attorney. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s named Judge Martinez, the kind of person you don't interrupt mid-sentence unless you've got a death wish and a backup lawyer. Things began with Karen's team trying to assert that the house had been informally promised to Randall by community tradition, and that my deed, while technically legal, violated the spirit of the HOA's vision. Hank stood, all 6'4" of him, and said calmly, "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence what the spirit of the HOA's vision looks like when it's typed in Word on a drunk teenager's laptop." The judge didn't even blink. Admitted. One by one, our witnesses testified. Haskins's video was played on the overhead monitor. His voice, raspy but clear, filled the room. I never gave that house to nobody. Karen offered me money. I said no. Anything else is a lie. Deputy Wilkes recounted the moving truck incident and the subsequent trespassing complaints. Nancy confirmed the parcel had never been part of Clear Pine and never would be. Adam, bless his cautious soul, played the footage of Karen showing the board the forged letter and saying, "It doesn't need to be legal, just believable enough to keep him on edge." But the best moment came during Hank's cross-examination of Randall. "Mr. Stone," he said, flipping a page in the evidence binder, "can you explain why a document claiming to be written by Wallace Haskins in 2012 was created on your MacBook Air in February of this year?" Randall tried to shrug it off. "I don't know. My mom writes stuff on my laptop sometimes. Does your mother often impersonate elderly men in legal documents?" Carr objected. Overruled. Karen's defense didn't last long after that. When it came her time to testify, she tried to spin the narrative as a misunderstood good faith stewardship initiative, claiming she was trying to preserve the cultural cohesion of the community. Judge Martinez stopped her cold. "Miss Stone, are you suggesting that forging legal documents, sabotaging property, and initiating an online harassment campaign constitute stewardship?" Karen stammered. "They were symbolic gestures." Like cutting someone's mooring line, Karen didn't respond. The final blow came when the judge asked whether she had any notarized or registered legal claim to the property. Brent Carr sighed. "No, Your Honor." The courtroom fell so silent you could hear Randall's Monster Energy can crumpling in his hand. Judge Martinez turned the page of her notes and said, "Then the court finds the following. It was swift and decisive. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my property. The letter was fraudulent, and its creation involved intentional deception. The harassment campaign constituted civil and criminal misconduct. The attempted occupation and surveillance represented trespass, invasion of privacy, and emotional distress. The Clear Pine HOA was found jointly liable due to the actions of its leadership and board complicity." The court ordered Karen Stone to pay $250,000 in damages personally, the HOA to pay an additional $125,000. A permanent injunction prohibiting Karen or Randall from approaching within 500 feet of my property. A directive to the county land office to annotate my parcel as legally excluded from any current or future HOA jurisdiction. Karen's mouth twitched like she wanted to speak, but Judge Martinez was already handing the gavel down. Court adjourned. I stood there, trying to feel triumphant. Relief came first, then exhaustion. then a wave of something closer to fury, not just at them, but at the fact that I'd had to fight for something that was already mine. Outside, as we stepped down the courthouse steps, Adam clapped me on the back. "You just beat the HOA Queen of Clear Pine," he said. "That's like slaying a dragon in this county." "Yeah," I muttered. "Let's just hope it stays dead." It rained the morning they hauled Karen out in cuffs. Not in a cinematic thunderclap kind of way, just a steady, miserable drizzle that slicked the courthouse steps and flattened everyone's hair into wet confessionals. A deputy held an umbrella over her head, but she waved him off. Her jaw clenched like she still believed this was some kind of temporary PR setback. Randall trailed behind her, head down, hands stuffed into the pockets of an ill-fitting hoodie. The cameras were already rolling. Turns out forging legal documents, tampering with property, and weaponizing an HOA for personal gain doesn't just earn you fines. It also gets the attention of the county prosecutor, especially when you've left behind a digital trail like a toddler in a glitter factory. The charges came in waves: attempted fraud, evidence fabrication, conspiracy to commit civil harassment, and criminal trespass by proxy. The icing on the cake? A subpoena from the state bar. Apparently, you can't just call yourself a lawyer while running an extortion racket out of a gated community. The Clear Pine HOA collapsed within a month. Following the court verdict and Karen's arrest, over 60% of the residents filed a motion to dissolve the association. The remaining members either resigned or turned state's witness to avoid further liability. Someone even started a subreddit, r/ClearPineExiles. The top post was titled, "Karen tried to annex my lawn, but I wasn't celebrating. Not yet." There was still fallout. Repairing the retaining wall, replacing the mailbox again, repainting the guest house, scrubbing off the spray paint that bled through like a stubborn ghost. Randall had vanished. Rumor had it he'd moved to Florida to start over, probably working at a vape shop and blaming the justice system for his life choices. Karen? She eventually took a plea deal, 5 years probation, a permanent ban from holding any community board position in the state, and a hefty chunk of her assets liquidated to pay the judgment. I'm told she sold her house. I didn't care enough to check. I did get a certified letter from her lawyer, though. It wasn't an apology, more of a thinly veiled threat disguised as closure. My client regrets that a misunderstanding grew into such a protracted conflict and hopes both parties can now move on peacefully. I framed it right next to my court order that explicitly listed my property as legally exempt from any HOA influence, now and forever. I took some time off after that, shut down the office, closed the company for a few weeks, and let my crew take paid leave. I spent the days walking the property, hauling lumber, resetting fence posts, trimming brush. No power tools, just handwork, the kind of labor that reminds your muscles they exist for something besides tension. One morning, I carved a sign by hand. Nothing fancy, just an old plank, sanded smooth, letters burned in with a soldering iron. No means no, even if you run the HOA. I hung it above the front door. The story spread wider than I expected. A local reporter picked it up, then a podcast, then a property rights blog, and then suddenly my inbox was flooded with messages, strangers telling me about their own HOA nightmares, people asking for advice, legal referrals, moral support. Some angry, some scared, some just exhausted. So I started writing. A blog at first, HOA Survivor. I told my story piece by piece, documented the whole mess from beginning to end, every invoice, every note, every lie. It went viral. I started getting invites to speak at property rights events. One group even offered to sponsor a book. I turned them down. This wasn't about cashing in. It was about warning the next guy. The one who buys a quiet lakeside place, just wanting to heal, and ends up in a war because someone in a cardigan thinks bylaws trump the Bill of Rights. The lake is calm now. Most mornings, I sit on the dock with black coffee and no phone. The frogs returned. The heron that used to nest in the reeds came back this spring. I named him Judge. Sometimes Adam stops by, brings fresh bread his wife bakes. We don't talk about the HOA. We just watch the water and laugh at nothing. I still lock the gate every night. Habit, I guess. But it's not fear anymore. It's stewardship. The real kind. This house, my house, doesn't need to be defended anymore. Just lived in.